Hello students, we're finishing up with the vector resolution. You started problems 1 through 10 yesterday. You should have gone through and checked your work with the answers on Schoology. If you did, great. Today's work won't be much different than that. The one item I do want to cover is how we address question number 12 and 13, where you have what are called riverboat problems. We will set up question 12 and answer part A and B, but we're also going to answer more questions than what number 12 is actually asking, because when it comes test time, I plan on asking you more than just what's the resultant velocity and the time. So I'm going to go over everything that you're going to be asked to do on a test for question number 12. All right, so question 12, we're going to have, it says a boat is traveling at 40 meters per second straight across a river. All right, so what we're going to set up for number 12 is you have your boat and it's going to go across the river like this at 40 meters per second. The second part of this, it heads straight across the river and it has a distance of 130 meters. So we're going to come down here and we're just going to set this on top of this. We're going to say that the distance across this river is 320 meters wide, right like this. Okay. So each part, we're just taking it step by step. It says if the water flows at a rate of 8 meters per second. Now, we're going to say that the water in the river is flowing downstream like this at a rate of 8 meters per second. It asks us first, what is the boat's velocity with respect to the shore? All right. What that is really getting at is simply, what is the resultant velocity right here? All right, now since we have two sides of what is now a right triangle, we can use the Pythagorean theorem where we have our resultant equals the square root of 40 squared plus 8 squared. And then we can get our angle inside of here based on the fact that we know that the 8 is the opposite side and the 40 is the adjacent side. That will require us to use tangent theta equals 8 divided by 40. Now, when we put these into the calculator, you should end up with the square root of 40 squared plus 8 squared. That'll tell us the resultant velocity. The resultant velocity, I'm going to put it in a light blue color. We have 40.8 meters per second. And then the angle at which it's going downstream will have 8 divided by 40 equals, and your angle for this is going to be 11.3 degrees. And I'm just going to say with respects to downshore, all right, so downshore, or downstream, right like this. All right, that is the first part. That would be like part A. So what other type of questions could I ask you with this? Well, part B says, how much time does it take to get across the river? Now, since it's talking about getting across the river, what we need to do is think about only this across information right here. You don't want to think about downstream because we're looking at the time to get across the river. All right, so we can use that formula, velocity equals distance divided by time. And when we rearrange this now, we would just take the distance divided by the velocity, or 320 meters divided by your 40 meters per second. So the time to get across the river is simply 8 seconds. Now, this is not part of the questions, but I guarantee you on a test, I'm going to ask you the following questions now. I'm going to ask you for part C, I'm going to say, how far downstream is this boat going to end up? All right, so distance downstream, if the boat is pointing straight across the river and it's on the river for 8 seconds, it's going to be pushed downstream at a rate of 8 meters for every single second. So if we still take that velocity formula and I rearrange it, velocity times time, I know that I am traveling, the boat is being pushed downstream at a rate of 8 meters per second. And for every single 1 second, we're gaining a distance of 8 meters. So if I'm on the boat or on the river for 8 seconds crossing it, that means that I'm going to be pushed downstream 64 meters. All right. One last question here. The last question might be, since the boat is moving across and downstream, one might ask the question, what is the actual distance along this path right here? How can we figure out what this distance is right here? All right, that's not a difficult question, and actually it gives you a lot of options here. See, we have several different ways that we can solve this. We have the distance right here that is across the river. We have the distance right here that is down the river. Well, that's two sides of a right triangle. So you could figure out the distance of this path by taking C equals the square root of 320 squared plus 64 squared. We could solve it that way. Now, another way that we could solve that is we have the angle, that 11.3. So we potentially could solve the distance of this, and with that opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, we could say cosine 11.3 degrees, that's our angle. We'd have adjacent, which is the 320. 320 divided by the hypotenuse, that would get you your value. Or you could even say sine 11.3 degrees equals, you take your 64 divided by the hypotenuse. Now, what you're going to find is that all three ways will get you the exact same value for that distance. So there's a lot of different choices that you have. The only way that you're going to be able to figure out what that answer is if you've taken the time and labeled everything up to see what options are available to you. All right, now I'm not going to give you any other setups on this page because at this point in time, you should be familiar enough to sketch out the diagrams, and you have had all the math now. We've been working on it for over a week. So if you need some help, I'm not opposed to helping you, but I do want you to try to figure out some of the work on your own because we're going to have a test coming up shortly. And on the test, you're not going to have me guiding you through this. All right. So it would be a good idea for you to, reach out on your own, try to figure out your answers, and then compare them to what I have listed inside of Schoology to see if you're doing them right. All right. If there aren't any questions, when you're finished, go ahead and submit this to Schoology, and then we'll move on to the next item. All right. Take care.